You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you today. Before I introduce our guest, I want to say thank you so much to everyone listening from the United States, Canada, Australia. We have listeners in Africa, in Europe, of course, in Latin America as well. I want to say thank you for listening to Carrie. Probably she's going to listen to this, to Lou, to Ed, and to Marco. Who else in the New York City area? Probably Martha is going to listen to this as well, and other friends in the New York area as well in other parts of the world. So if you want to be on the show, I have been doing this show for more than a decade now. You can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at lowvisionbureau. And well, I'm very excited to do this interview because our guest, her name is Jessica Murray. She's a researcher. She's a disability advocate, an activist. She has been doing for 2 years a profound investigation about the accessibility of the New York City transit system. And so, as you know, I work in the past in New York. I have been so many times in New York. I have so many friends in New York. I love New York. And the subway is a challenge. Whether you are sighted, you have any disability, is a challenge. It's a powerful, powerful system. It has more than 470 stations, I was reading today. And it's a big challenge to navigate and never get lost. I suppose everybody gets lost in New York City anyways. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Jessica. And the first question comes to mind is, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. So my undergrad was in interdisciplinary design. I worked as a graphic designer for about 10 years before I decided to go back to school. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to study, but I knew that I had an interest in commuting and the psychological effect of commuting on well-being. I grew up in Texas, so it's a very different environment than New York. I pretty much had to drive everywhere. And I think being stuck in rush hour traffic in a car is a very different experience than commuting in the city by subway or by bus. So I was just kind of interested in how the commute kind of spills over into your work life and your home life. So I first completed a master's degree in the psychology of work and family, which was kind of a specialized track at the grad center at CUNY. And then I decided to go on and do a PhD in developmental psychology. I kind of met early on in my master's program. I met a disability advocate and activist named Simi Linton, and I think she kind of opened my eyes to a few of the transportation problems that people with disabilities encounter on a regular basis. She was a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Taxi and Limousine Commission and fighting for more accessible taxis. And so I think that, as I said, that kind of opened my eyes, and I started talking to people with different disabilities about their experiences and realized that, there's just a lot of unnecessary stress that people with disabilities have to go through when they're trying to navigate the city.
Very exciting, Jessica. Okay, the first question that comes to mind about an accessible system like the New York City subway system, which is very complex, you could say. I have a lot of sighted friends also in New York, and they say they rarely go into the subway. They get afraid of getting to the subway. I never understood that, Jessica, and for our listeners, because what you need to do is well, in my case, sometimes it's complicated to get oriented, of course, because of my small vision that I have right now. But besides that, getting oriented is not super easy. But I know they are improving a lot of things in that regard. So first, I would like to know what are some of the biggest obstacles that people tell you during your research that they encounter in their day-to-day life?
Well, I think especially for people who are blind or have low vision, it's less about the obstacles and more about the lack of information that's available. So there is some Braille signage and raised lettering on the entrances of the subway and in some of the subway stations near the staircases, but those locations are not always consistent. Sometimes it'll be on the left side of the entrance, sometimes it'll be on the right side. I don't know why it's not on both sides. And yeah, if you are at the top of a staircase, there's not really any signage telling you where you're heading. Like if the platform, what direction it's going, the train is going, or what train line it is, even none of that information is in places where you need to make decisions. So it's very minimal and it's not really good enough. So there's the lack of information in that regard. And then there's also inconsistency with tactile warning strips. There's still about 100 stations that don't have the warning strips on the edges of the platforms, which can be really dangerous. And then in some of the more complex stations where there are multiple train lines, there's very little information to help someone that has poor vision to get around. So there aren't any tactile guideways for someone that uses a cane. It's just, people are literally wandering around in the dark and it's really hard for them to find where they're going. And so a lot of people who do try to use the subway end up getting extensive orientation and mobility training for, their home station and maybe a couple of other stations that they traveled to frequently. But in terms of being able to navigate completely independently, it's still very challenging for people. I think people with seeing eye dogs, are a little bit more brave and try it out more often. But they almost always still have to end up asking for help if they're in an unfamiliar location.
Now, Jessica, for people who are not familiar with the New York City transit system, can you tell our listeners a little bit how it's organized?
So New York City has, we have a subway system. It was originally 3 different companies. So there's some, kind of little quirks between the three different companies that were later combined into one company. So, there's kind of, some lines will maybe have really old cars that don't have some of the features like the automated announcements that tell you which station you're approaching, which train line you're on, which direction it's going. And so a lot of those trains rely on the conductors to remember to give the announcements. We also have a bus system that's pretty extensive. Some buses travel between boroughs, but most stay within the boroughs. And within that system, there are also some buses that are express buses, meaning that they have fewer stops, and others are local, which means that they stop more frequently. And then there are additional express buses that are more for commuters, and those have a little bit higher fare, and those tend to go between the boroughs. And then there's, the commuter rail lines, which is Metro North and Long Island Railroad, which, extend into other parts of New York State. And so they all kind of are under this umbrella of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And they also oversee the bridges and tunnels that come into the city. It's a really massive organization with about 70,000 employees.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah, very big.
Now, you touched already one of the questions I had prepared, and it's about those announcements of the subway stations. Now, let me tell you a story, a little anecdote more. In many occasions when I was working there and I was commuting from Brooklyn into Soho, and I needed 2 subway trains, and I would go into the subway train and I would say, okay, I would sit down and I would say, okay, so now how do I know where do I have to stop here and go out and find my way and everything?
Mhm.
So I said, well, of course, there's going to be someone announcing every single station. Yes, but no.
Mhm.
For our listeners, in some occasions, I would freak out because the door would open and I would say, oh my God, this is another station, but nobody said
Where am
anything.
I? Yeah.
So I would, because my vision is so little, I would say, I have to listen carefully to see if someone is around me and be able to ask them, excuse me, what is this station? And
Right.
so they would say, okay, you are in 34th Street. And I would say, okay. So I have to count maybe 4, maybe 5. And I would go that way, Jessica, and for our listeners, because I remember once there was no announcement from all the trip I had to go from point A to point B. And I was really freaking out,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like 8 stations and nobody was announcing that. So I started to memorize how many stops I had to count. And so I had to listen to the door opening. And when it would
Right.
open, I would say, okay, 1, next time
Right.
2, next time 3, blah, blah, blah. But you have to be focused, Jessica, because if you're not, of course, you're going to go into another station and it's going to be a different ballgame, as you know, for anyone who has got lost in the subway, as many of our listeners has. Okay, now, so you're touching an important subject, and is, sometimes there is an automaticated system that is going to tell you what is the station and what is next, etc., and that is wonderful. And I encountered that many times, but I also encountered the conductor who is a little bit lazy and says like maybe he's sleepy or something, and it's hard to understand what the person is saying. They are not vocalizing very well. So it's like that. And you're like, what? So is that changing, Jessica? Is people getting a little bit better trained? Is people getting a little bit more excited maybe about announcing something so important? Because some people have hearing issues. Some people need certain volume. And some of the speakers are not loud enough. What can you say about that, Jessica?
Well, I think this goes back to the issue I was talking about earlier. Some of the trains are old. They don't have the best, announcement equipment. So the speakers are not loud enough. It could be that the conductor is not putting his or her mouth close enough to the microphone when they make the announcements. And then there's also, the issue of, maybe the conductor doesn't feel like doing announcements that day, and they don't really understand the importance of communicating for people that can't see out the window and figure out where they are. I mean, I think this has been an issue for decades, literally. And there's a Saturday Night Live sketch that's, probably from like the 90s, where they're kind of mimicking the announcements, and it's like, it's all garbled, and, so it's just an ongoing problem that needs to be addressed. And I think, the MTA, I think, is trying to figure out ways to approach this issue in a way that can use technology a little bit to help people, because in addition to the poor sound quality, you also have the issue of, train stations and the subway in general are very noisy places.
Right.
And so one thing that I've noticed that also is annoying is that, you'll be in a station and you'll hear the beginning of the announcement. It says, "Ladies and gentlemen," and then, of course, the train just starts coming into the station while the announcement is happening. So you can't actually hear it. So I think they're trying to figure out ways to send alerts to people on their smartphones so that then anyone could access that information. But I mean, you still have people that don't have smartphones, and it's not always practical to have this out while you're traveling. So I think, these are really fundamental problems that they've never quite figured out how to tackle. I think some of the newer trains with the automated announcements, at least the clarity of the announcements is clear, and it's consistent. So, the conductor forgetting or being, not wanting to do the announcements would never be a problem. But, occasionally those have their problems too. Sometimes the automated announcements also just don't work and they don't happen. So then it's, you're just hoping you're getting on the right train, hoping you're getting off at the right stop. But I think this idea of having to memorize where you're at and count and be alert is something that came up over and over and over again in the different interviews that I did with people with all kinds of different disabilities. And even people who are not English speakers.
Right.
These are all problems that, have been going on for a long time, and definitely need more attention.
Now, Jessica, things have improved. Can you give us some examples of improvement in the access to this powerful subway system?
Well, I think, my initial interest was around elevators and wheelchair accessibility. And I think, there's been some slight improvement there. We've gotten a few more stations that are accessible in the last 4 or 5 years. There are commitments from the MTA to make many more stations accessible in the next 5 years. They committed to making 70 additional stations accessible, by the end of 2024. I don't know if that will actually happen, but at least it's a goal. They haven't really committed to making the subway 100% accessible. And some of those matters are tied up in court. There's a couple of different lawsuits happening right now, including one about, keeping the elevators maintained so that they are available and functioning properly when people need them. But I think it's we're definitely trying to grow awareness and put political pressure on our leaders to step up and prioritize this and fund it. Most of these problems are not insurmountable. They just need to be prioritized and funded, I think.
Well, I have a powerful question, but it's gonna go later on. It's gonna be a real powerful question, but I have to ask that. Okay. Now I understand you are the associate director of a documentary about this. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. So the film is called The Biggest Obstacle, and it actually started off as a project for a course that the director was taking. They just completed their MFA in Integrated Media Arts at Hunter College in May. And so they were working on a documentary short and asked if I wouldn't mind being interviewed. So I said, okay. It was supposed to be a 10-minute thing. We kind of did some interviews, did some other footage. And then I was also working on a guide to help people with different types of disabilities navigate the subway, but I wanted to get their knowledge and recommendations firsthand, and not, kind of try to tell other people about things that I don't personally experience.
Right. And
so we kind of teamed up and interviewed about 10 people and went on ride-alongs, just traveled with them on the subway or the bus, depending on which mode of transportation they preferred. And just, kind of tried to highlight some of the challenges they encountered and show firsthand what people are dealing with on a regular basis when they try to travel within the city. And so over the course of about a year and a half or 2 years, we collected over 25 hours of footage, and the 10-minute documentary kind of grew into this, feature-length film. It's about an hour and 40 minutes long. And a lot of it's about the, not just the problems and how people kind of figure out how to deal with them, but also the political fights, and people trying to get access to public transportation so that they can be, active members of society and live their lives like everyone else is able to. I think people without disabilities take for granted the subway, even with all of its difficulties for non-disabled people, is just not really accessible to many people.
Now, Jessica, how can people watch that documentary who live in New York?
So we're working on trying to get it distributed now. It's currently on a film distribution network called Film Hub, and so we're hoping that a distributor will pick it up and display it on their channel. So stay tuned for that. But we've also been, doing film screenings. I can share a link to an extended preview if people just want to get kind of an overview of the film.
Sure.
Yeah. But, hopefully we have it on a platform that people can watch it. This is not really my wheelhouse at all. I'm not really a filmmaker. I think I just, because I helped with finding people to interview and, kind of helped with some of the, we did all of it on pretty much no budget at all. So I was, carrying film equipment, and we were just kind of finding places we could interview people. We didn't really have access to a studio space or anything like that. So it's all very low budget and unscripted, but I think the filmmaker did a really excellent job weaving all of these different stories together. So I hope that we have a way to get it out to a wider audience very soon.
Who is the filmmaker?
Their name is Gerard Dolan, and they just took a job at MIT, so they just moved to Boston, hopefully temporarily, I don't know. A very talented filmmaker, and they've been doing it for a long time, and just decided to get a master's in order to teach, and so that's what they're doing now.
Jessica, it's wonderful that you did this documentary, and it's very important to raise awareness about what is not working and also highlighting what is working.
Right.
Okay, you were talking before about an obsession, because it really is an obsession, to people with disabilities. And it's a good obsession, but it's an obsession, and it's when will things be fully accessible? The question for Jessica is it realistic to believe that any huge, like train system, subway system, like the New York City subway system, will ever be fully accessible? Is it utopic to believe that, or do you think it's going to happen, or do you think, well, let's be clear, we may get to 80%, 70%? What do you say?
I think the political fight has been going on for a long time, and I think we've seen more progress in the last few years than we had for many years before that. I think now there is more of a push, not just from the disabled community, but also from people without disabilities who need elevators from time to time, and also just it's like maybe they have a family member or a friend who they see struggling with any transportation at all on a regular basis, and I think there is more awareness, and we are seeing more politicians talking about it and supporting it. So I think it's definitely achievable. Like I said, these are not, it's other cities have managed to do this, including, making the subway navigable for people who are blind or have low vision. These are not impossible barriers to overcome. New York City is big, but I think scale is not really an issue so much as, because we have a bigger budget, we have more fares coming in. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to accomplish this. I think it just it boils down to leaders who want to make this a priority, and the MTA committing to say, yes, we can do it and we will do it, and here's a timeline.
Okay, so here goes the powerful question before I tell you one or two anecdotes about my my commuting experiences there. There's something I don't understand, and probably Ed or Lou or Carrie listening to this will say, yeah, because you're very naive about it. Yeah, probably so. But still, I wonder, okay, if making the subway accessible for us, for everybody, is important, but not only is important, is the right thing to do. It complies with the ADA, and also it allows the city to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you make more accessible the subway, then people who are not using the subway are going to use it every day, and that's going to be more money for the city and for people who work there. Can you help me understand why some people don't do what they have to do? I mean, it's hard for me to understand, to be honest with you. You have one of the richest cities in the world, where you would say people are committed to benefit everybody, not because it's good for society, but because it's good for their pocket too,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to understand, Jessica, why would some people working at the MTA or whatever it may be saying, it's not a priority? Why? I don't understand.
Well, I think, historically, people with disabilities have not had a lot of political power. because, many people with disabilities live in poverty. And, they don't, I think there's a perception that they don't really vote. There are some polling places here that are inaccessible. And that's been a fight. Just to be able to get into the polling place has been a challenge. It's not completely fixed yet. So I think, when you're working in a system where it's the way money is spent has to do with who has the political power. It's very easy to put accessibility low on the list of priorities. And the MTA has always, for almost as long as they've been an agency, which was, I think that happened around in the 1940s, when they kind of consolidated and became, a state-run organization. They've always had, financial issues because people don't want to pay a lot for a fare on the subway, and so it's always a political fight to if they want to raise the fares at all. There's a lot of opposition. They've never gotten the funding they need to keep the system itself working properly. There's some signaling equipment that's over a century old. So there's a lot of challenges that I think for decision makers, that most of whom are not disabled. I don't know if they've ever had any disabled members of the MTA board. We have our first disabled board member, who's the mayor's office for people with disabilities. He was confirmed earlier this year. So I think when you have people in power that are making decisions, and these are issues that don't affect them personally, it's going to be more of a low priority, and it's an expense. Of course, you have to spend money to make things accessible. That's just how it is. But unless they're being forced to do it, so far they haven't wanted to. And I think the appeals for, that this is good for society in general, I don't know. I don't know why that's not a compelling argument for the people that are actually making the decisions, but so far that hasn't been a compelling argument.
For our listeners, she's referring to Victor Colisi. I met him during my stay in New York City working for RB on site. I went to the mayor's office for people with disabilities a few times. Being him wheelchair user himself, I'm sure he's going to help with elevators and stuff like that. So that's pretty important. Okay, Jessica, I have a question. When it comes to the accessibility of the subway system, do you go like disability by disability? In other words, you say, okay, so for wheelchair users, we need better elevators, better ramps, etc. For people who are blind, we need orientation systems, or we need maybe mobile applications. We need a good Wi-Fi connection so they are able to access applications that will guide them through the subway system in ways that they were not possible before. Things that you were saying, like alerting with messages, etc. When we go to people who maybe have hearing issues, we are going to have these other systems, maybe vibration systems, whatever it may be. Or am I being too naive also about planning too much? What is being done specifically disability by disability?
I think that's right. Because everyone has different needs. Some of them overlap, but yeah, for the most part, it's like you were describing. I think, there is attention being paid to all of these things, but I think the pace of progress is just it's not as quick as I would like for it to be. But I think the only other kind of disability that isn't really being addressed well right now is people that have any kind of cognitive or intellectual disabilities.
Right.
And I think the wayfinding system as it is now is not really helpful for people that have any kind of language processing or other kind of cognitive disorders. And, I think that they kind of just need to overhaul the whole wayfinding system. What they have now is it's based in minimalism, which is not really compatible with international best practices for wayfinding. So I'll explain what that means. When they changed over to this new wayfinding system, it's been probably about 40 years now. The person who developed the kind of design guidelines, and he kind of created a template for how to put signage up in the subway. And at the time, there were a lot of, because they had all these, 3 systems that became one, and it was just kind of people adding signage over the years. It kind of became a big cluttered mess of signs everywhere. And so they said, oh, I want to simplify it, but then they oversimplified it. So, if your sighted friends feel turned around to the subway, it may be because they have to, go to all the way to a staircase to figure out which way that they're exiting. And that was by design. They said, okay, we'll only put signs over a stairway. So if you go to another city like London, it's when you come out of the train, you see a little strip of, at the top of the wall when you come out, and it's pointing, this direction is this exit, and then this direction is this exit. So you can go right or left, and you see when you come out which way you need to go. Other systems use, they'll have a number for each exit. So if you want to go to exit number 1, you go left. If you want to go to exit number 2, you go right. Any of these things could help people, but it would take a commitment to overhauling what they have now. I think another issue is that there's an over-reliance on English and words to communicate any information in the subway. So if they could replace some of those words with icons that are more recognizable to people, that would also go a long way, and that would help people that are dyslexic or have, there are a lot of reasons why people get confused, and there's really no reason why someone with a cognitive disability should have to take paratransit to get around if they don't have any other physical disabilities or vision disabilities.
Okay, some ideas that come to mind. I think they should ensemble a group of people with different disabilities and make them part of the conversation, but go with them to every single station in the city that they are going to make more accessible, and making a priority to make that one station accessible all the way before you go into the next one, because doing things halfway is not going to help. And the other thing is, the MTA system, they could have a mobile application. Now that Wi-Fi is all across the city and everywhere in the subway, as my friends tell me, and make it that it can tell you in real time what is happening in the system. In other words, train B is coming in 5 minutes to the station 34. But if you have that system implemented, it's not going to help everybody, but surely it's going to help most of the people, because most of the people have a smartphone, and it's a great beginning. Now,
well, I will tell you that the MTA does have an advisory board for transit accessibility. I'm the chair of it. We have 18 people with different types of disabilities. And we talk about a lot of these issues. There's also the My MTA app, which does exactly what you're describing. You can navigate to find which train line and which station you're in, and it will tell you when the trains are coming. It's not always accurate, so sometimes some service changes may not be reflected. But I think, yeah, what you're saying, like going to making one station work really well and make it accessible, that was an idea that we brought to the MTA and said you should make it one model station, figure out all the issues, and then replicate it everywhere else. But somehow that was turned into a pilot where they were trying out a lot of different technology and whatnot. And it only lasted for a few months. And so I don't know what they really learned or what they decided to replicate to other stations, but the intent of having one model station that people can give feedback on and they can develop over time until they have one standard was something that we asked for. And yeah, I think ultimately the MTA needs to hire people with disabilities to inform them, because there is, the chief accessibility officer is a person with a disability, but they can't really understand the problems the same way that, people with other types of disabilities encounter regularly. So I think it really should have a blind person and a deaf person on their team that can constantly remind them of the accessibility issues that they're not addressing.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Jessica, it sounds to me a lack of passion of many of the people who are working there, a lack of efficiency, of course, and a lack of commitment. Because when you are committed to something, you make it happen.
Right.
You, Jessica, have said it very well during this interview. You know the importance of this. And for some people, it's a matter of, well, I can say it like that, life and death, because they are people that, because they don't know how the system works, where there are dangers, etc., they may get killed. And it has happened in the city. And you hear it in the news as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very important subject. And, I know people who are leaders in the disability community in New York. They could do a lot of good to the MTA. And the other thing about the application you are mentioning, I'm sure it's okay, but to be honest with you, I have talked to a few blind friends in New York, and they tell me those applications work very so-so. They have to improve it a lot. That's what they have told me. Okay, now, an anecdote about me. Okay, one of the anecdotes is because I still can see, and when I was in New York, I was able to see a little bit too. And I would go into the station, I would wait for the train, let me see. Oh yes, the train D from Denmark, okay? And then a train would come, and because my vision is so little, I would ask someone, listen, is that the D train? The noise in the station is huge, as you say. So they would tell me, and many people don't speak English there, so they would tell me something like D or B or whatever, and I would say, okay, that's the D train, okay. So I go there, and it was not the D train, it was the B from Brooklyn. So I would end up going to somewhere else. So that's a big issue, because you are relying on people, and many people, they either they cannot communicate very well in the English language, and they don't spell it well, and so you believe they're saying D, they say B. And if you don't have another system, then you're going to go to the wrong direction. So that's something to take into account. Now, the exiting, so when you go into a station and you go down the stairs and then you say, okay, do I go to the right or to the left? If you don't see enough and there is no one around, there has to be a way to get oriented. In that sense, for you, Jessica, and for our listeners, I'm going to do an interview with a company from Europe. They put a system in one of the stations in New York, actually, that is like, I think it's something like augmented reality system or something like that. And basically using your smartphone, you are able to communicate that with some of the information of the subway station you are in.
Is it Okina?
Okay, that's another one. What is Okina?
Okay.
Tell me about that one.
It does a lot, sounds like a lot what you're describing. It basically gives, they're doing a pilot of it and installing some beacons in one of the stations soon. And I think the other one may be Netherlands.
Yes, Netherlands.
Okay, yeah. So they both have different pilots, but Okina basically gives step-by-step navigation within this station.
How do you spell it?
Okenea, I think.
Where are they from?
France.
Really? And when is going to start?
They have to configure, it's going to still be probably a few weeks, if not a month, before it's ready.
Okay, but it's coming very soon.
Coming soon, yeah. I mean, everything was delayed because of the pandemic. They weren't able to actually fly here until recently. So now the travel ban has been lifted. They're going to be doing some work in the station, and it'll be at J Street Metrotech sometime, either later this year or early next year, I think.
Okay, wonderful.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's the way to go. You need to be trying new things and see what works, etc.
Yeah.
And also what is not so expensive, right?
Yeah.
Because that's important when you have a huge system. Another anecdote. Once I was told by someone, if you need assistance, go to the end of the train and then you're going to find the conductor or something that is going to help you out. And I was not able to find the end of the train. So those are things that, because you are in a hurry, right? And you don't see, see much. And someone says, go to the end of it, and they say, yeah, where? and so those kind of things need to find a way to be improved or find guides or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to mention, and it happened a lot in Brooklyn. So you go into the Brooklyn subway, blah, blah, blah. You're walking there in the subway station and you don't find a booth. You don't find a person to talk to, and it gets sometimes frustrating, because there's people are hurrying because they are late getting to work. You need to take the train. You are not sure which one to take. And you are also not sure where to pay. Or you need change. And you are looking for a booth. You are not able to find a booth. Do you think, Jessica, there will be ways to implement like a booth guide or booth map where you can say maybe to your right you're going to have a booth, I don't know, 100 meters away, or maybe you can communicate to the person inside the booth by using a mobile application? I don't know, something could be done.
Yeah, I think the stations really need diagrams or some signage that shows, if you're inside the station, which way you need to go, or something to indicate where you need to go. Because some of the stations, there's the train goes in two directions, and maybe they each have their own entrance, and the booth is only on one side. So if you don't know that, then you're wandering around the other side of the station, and you can't actually get across because you're already inside. There are help points in every station. So these are, there's usually like a blue light on them. But yeah, it kind of goes back to, in the film, we actually encounter one of these help points. We're traveling with a woman named Nefertiti Matos, and she's trying to find her way around this. It's not that complicated of a station, but there are multiple lines there, and she's trying to find the staircase where she needs to go. And so the director says, "Oh, why don't you try that help point?" And she says, "What is that? I've never heard of this. Maybe if it made a noise or something, so I knew it was there, or if there was any kind of awareness about that this feature exists, she would know about it." And so in the film, she kind of calls the help point and says, I'm trying to find this, where to go to get on this train. And they say, "Oh, look for the sign that says NQRW." And she says, "Well, I can't look for it because I'm blind." And it takes a couple of times because they're just like, "Oh no, you should see a sign that says this." And she says, "Okay, right. I can't see. So I can't," and she says, "Well, do you know," and they're trying to figure out where she is in the station. They call the person in the booth that's at the station. And it turns out they don't know, they have no idea where the help point is in the station. So the having a diagram and making sure that that's communicated to the people that are supposed to be there, because in theory, this system where it's like, oh great, I can just call if I need information or help. In theory, it's great, but in practice, it's people don't know about it or what it can help with. There are people that are left out that if they can't speak, or that if they, I don't know if they speak in different languages through this call center, they may not be able to get much help from that. If the operators only speak English, that's a problem. If they can't hear what the person is saying, that's not helpful to them. So that it just needs a little bit more thought, and it needs to be more integrated into the system, to where if those operators or even the person at the booth said, "Oh, she's at help point number 125, that's right here next to the staircase," they would be able to tell her which way to go. But they couldn't do that because they don't have all the information they need.
To be very honest with you, Jessica, I need to tell you a little anecdote again. It's a little frustrating to hear you say certain things. Other things are good, are uplifting, but some others you say, it's incredible that it is happening in 2021 with the ADA, more than 25 years, 30 years, and it's unbelievable to me. But oh well, as I said, it's a lack of efficiency, of commitment, passion. You need to find more passionate people, for sure, in the New York City area. And I'm going to tell you an anecdote that proved that. It happened in 2015, but it has happened always that I go to New York. And it happens not only in the subway, it happens everywhere. And it's something that the city has to change. And people who hire, whoever may be hiring, the hiring manager, whatever it may be, they truly make a big mistake. And it's this. I was at a bus station in Manhattan, and I went to the bus and I was talking to the driver, and the driver was very quiet and not very well educated. And I said to him, "Listen, do you have this attitude every day?" And he said, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "Well, you are in a wonderful city. you have a job, and you don't seem to be so happy about it. And he said, man, this is tough. And I said, yeah, life is tough, my friend. I'm blind. Life is not easy for anybody. But it's what you make of life what matters in life. And like that, Jessica, I found in New York, I don't know, probably 80% of people working in the city with a not so wonderful attitude about life. Of course, if you put that into the subway system, people who you call and say, I have no idea. Some people will care, but many people will not care to go the extra mile. And that's what I'm saying, Jessica. When people hire someone, better be people who are passionate about what they're doing, and they believe in what they're doing, and they want to help others, Jessica. Because if not, yeah, you have people helping, but they are not helping all the way.
Yeah.
And you, in New York City, you can find people that really love the city, are committed, are passionate. Find those people, hire those people. Don't hire just to hire someone, just to fill a job. You have to do it with common sense, but you have to love what you are doing. And if you are helping people with disabilities, you have to love people. You have to love helping others. If not, it's not going to work. And I bet some of the things are not working in the subway are because of that. Trust me, I know what I'm saying. All right, Jessica, time is up. What are your final thoughts?
Well, I agree with you there. I mean, I think it's not just the hiring, it's also the training. And I think unless people have personal experience with someone in their family or a friend who has a disability, I think they often don't think about it. I mean, it's like, if you don't encounter those challenges, it's just not top of mind for you. And I think this is something I've learned over the years working and studying this issue. And yeah, I think ultimately they also need to focus on hiring more people with disabilities. Right now, they have about half of 1% of their workforce has some sort of disability.
Wow.
That's atrocious, you know?
Yes.
And I think if they made an effort to diversify their workforce in that way and bring in people with the firsthand knowledge and expertise, that can lead to more rapid changes, because I think it's easier to kind of dismiss these problems as someone else's when it's not your coworker. You know what I mean? It's like, right. If there are more people with disabilities throughout the agency, I think that would have a much bigger impact on shaping the attitudes of the people that make decisions than, you know, all the lawsuits and whatever in the world. So I hope that they, you know, as they're you know, kind of setting their priorities for the agency. You know, I think a lot of it has been focused on recovering from the pandemic, but in the future, as we move forward, I hope that becomes one of the things that they work on to move that process along a little bit faster.
Jessica, I have to make a comment about what you said. It's super important about the exposure to people with disabilities, and also older folks who are also losing their sight or their hearing, and their families and friends who understand what is going on and who can educate the community. That makes me think, for our listeners, about this whole situation in the United States about the police departments everywhere. Whether you are Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. What matters is society. When you have a police department where you don't have diversity going on, when you have 90% of people white or 80% white, they don't understand diversity because they don't encounter that every day where they work. Of course, in the city they do, but not where they work. They need co-workers who are Black, who are Arabic, who are Hispanics, LGBT, whatever it may be. Then they're going to understand, they're going to be exposed to diversity.
Mhm.
And they're going to understand, and they're going to become friends with and respect more one another and have a much better society and a healthier planet, you know? I get very passionate about this, Jessica, because it makes me a little bit angry, to be honest with you. When you live in a country like Colombia, where we don't have the resources that you have in the US, when we don't have the possibilities you have in the US. Of course, in Colombia, we have a mess in public transportation. We don't have a subway
Mhm.
in the biggest city in the country, in Bogota, where I live. We are the capital of the country. We don't have a subway, okay, in 2021, because people steal the money and people, they don't care about the city, whatever it may be. But when I see things happening in New York City, where you have everything to your disposal, and people get lazy and they say, maybe we'll do it. They do it halfway. They are not committed. They are not efficient. I get angry about it because I said it couldn't happen. And it's a sin for our listeners to make it happen, to allow it to happen. It's a sin. I mean, I'm sure God is angry at it, thinking, I give them everything. And what did they do? In 2021, they are not able to make the public transportation system accessible. Oh, and by the way, Jessica, you should improve the train systems in modernizing them. I have many friends in Europe who go to New York and say, oh my God, where is the modern system that you guys don't have it? We have it in London, in France, we have it in China, we have it in Italy, we have it even in Spain, we have it. You don't have it in New York City. That's another sin, my friend. So there's a lot to think about, Jessica, not for you, but for the city. And people are proud of their country. Yes, step up to the plate and be proud about improving what they do and what people do for others, my friends. Because you have a lot of resources. Well, spend them well, use them well, and make society better every day. But not be lazy about it. Right. Because everybody deserves the right to be respected, valued, and accepted, and they deserve the right to use the subway, for crying out loud. I'm sorry I get so passionate about it, but it's because I care. I care about the US, I care about New York, I care about people, and I have a disability. So, and we should.
Transportation is one of those things that it does affect people emotionally. That's originally why I wanted to study this, because it affects your sense of autonomy. And, if you deal with frustrations over and over again, all of those compound over time and lead to stress and lead to a lower quality of life.
Yes, and Jessica, again, you guys can change this. If it was in Colombia, most likely not. We don't even have the subway system to begin with. But you have so many options, so many possibilities. You said it at the beginning of the interview. We have a big budget. Okay, so let's make it happen.
Exactly.
I'm sure this interview is going to make people think, and that's what I believe is important in life. It's not rosy-dosy, as a friend of mine says. You have to make changes in life, my friends, and you have to step up to the plate. Now, I have my last question, Jessica, is if someone who has a disability, is a disability rights advocate in New York City, wants to help the public system, what can they do? Who should they call?
They can reach out to the Elevator Action Group at Rise and Resist. This is something that we advocate for improving transit accessibility, and we use a variety of methods, and a lot of it has just been to try to build public awareness and political support for changing this problem. So you can find us on the web at riseandresist.org/EAG. And there's multiple ways to join our mailing lists or to get in touch with us directly.
Well, Jessica, it's been a wonderful wonderful privilege to have you on and be able to discuss this in a very honest and positive, but also realistic way, which is very important. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And for our listeners, remember to be active, be proactive, do something in your life, and never be lazy. Never. This is Alvaro from LVB Show saying good night.